around, get back into homeownership.
Right.
But then also investing and saving and having various pots for the money. And then education, going to college, finishing college, but going to college without debt, just really not going down that debt road. And then that's how you slowly rebuild. There's lots of criticism about African Americans and what they don't have in that figure, the $2,000. But let's be real. A lot of that is still because of what happened to us. And when you look at the studies and you look behind the numbers,
right.
families were taking care of families.
And
so that's why they don't have a lot of money. It's not like it's something in our genes that we can't save.
Oh, absolutely.
It annoys me so much when people say that. Families have been helping each other. You're sending your cousin to school, or you're helping your grandmother with her house. And so that's why they don't have a lot of equity. And then also, our pay wasn't the same way. We didn't have parents who paid for us to go to school, so we have those school loans. Now, having said that, we can't do what the rest of America does and live on a diet.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's the only piece you get. Like, the family is a tricky thing, man. Like, that's the majority of the downfalls.
Especially
family.
when you got money. When you're the only person in your family that's a millionaire.
Right. And talking to the white players, like, I think Kyle Cover had a big article about it. And he was like, like, you guys don't understand what these guys are going through. We were teammates. I remember he and I were in a meeting, we were talking about finances, like one of those mandatory meetings. And I was like, I take care of my mom, my brother, cousin, uncle, grandma. I bought my grandma a house, blah, blah, blah. He was like, you pay your parents' bills? Why would you do that?
Really?
Because that's not
the same, right?
That's not their culture. So he was like, why would you pay your mom's bill? And I was like, you don't pay. He was like, no, why would I do that? Like, he was like, what do you mean? Like, he was so lost to it. But we looking at him like, you don't help your mom out? But that's just not how they're raised. So, so when we on the court, that's a lot of guys' peace. Like, you can tell, like, oh, man, he is locked in because, like, he's at peace. Because when game's over, he got to go back to the madness, and then he got to navigate through all the madness. There's no other time for him to be at peace or be still except when he's on the court.
So Iguodala, who got traded right after this interview, coincidence or not? No, I don't think he got traded because of what he said. He was going to get traded because they just don't need him anymore on that team. They got to go a whole different route. But let's talk about what he said, though, about black men in particular, athletes going broke after so much time. And the difference is culturally, and we can look at that, how that affects us outside of sports and entertainment, but the average on-point black dude who gets on and what he got to deal with that curtails in marriage and dating life and what have you. Let's talk about it. So, I used to listen. That was a rude interruption. I used to listen to Iceman back in the day, years ago. I don't even know if he's still on YouTube. I didn't listen to long because dude was an idiot. But one of the things he said that was kind of profound to me, that it made me, I reflected it in life. I saw it in everyday life. It's how you can have a brother who works at a company. He's making 75 just like his white coworkers, but his 75 is different than his white coworkers. His coworker 75, the same white dude, he can do more with his wealth. He has a lot less baggage going into the world, right? So it's like, even when you have the equal incomes, right? Because people, the veteran tone will tell you, it ain't about money, it ain't about wages, it ain't about income, it's about wealth. Well, part of that, I agree with that. We can have the same income and still not generate the same wealth because of, issues culturally. And one of the things that Iceman said is that, that black dude is usually got to, take his whole team with him. He got to take care of mama. He got to take care of cousins and Pookies and Ray Rays and them and all that stuff. Now, it's one thing, again, if the hood and the family invested in you, you have an obligation to come back and do that. But when they don't, I don't think you do. I mean, obviously your family, you do, if, whatever, but to a point. And what Iguodala said was like, he's with his white or European basketball players, and he's like, well, we make the same as them. Some of us make more than them, and yet they get to sustain and build wealth. Their kids, it will translate down to their kids, and their kids will be wealthy too. But when you look at a lot of black athletes, that doesn't necessarily happen the same way, because first of all, we're always starting over, and it's never the top helping the bottom up, it's the bottom helping the top in our community often. So it's like, where will you hear about, these fake traditionalist women online talking about hypergamy and I want this and I want that, and comparing to other races of men without fully looking at the context of where black people are, period. And this is not just, I'm talking about this in the context of black men because it happens so more often we see it. But there are probably women right now. I know a chick right now who's taking care of her mom. Like, they made a deal and there was an agreement because of something that happened, but she's like paying her bills. And like, imagine you walking into a situation with a woman that she's already helping her mother with her own bills in her own house. She's got her own student loan debt and whatnot, and has a kid. Like, that's a lot to deal with when you're trying to get into a relationship. Meanwhile, her white female counterpart don't have to deal with all that. Like, she's not taking care of her parents. You know, if she does have student loans, it's minimal because her parents helped her out as much as they could. Or if she does get married, you know, the father's going to pay for it. These fake traditional chicks, they'll never talk about that daddy paying for that wedding either. But, yeah, so it's like, that's a discrepancy, like, you know, between us. I remember my grandfather saying this to me, and this is after I heard the, you know, the gem from Iceman. He was like, yo, like, he's in his 60s working in the factory, right, with men who are in their 30s and 40s, whatever. And he's like, you know, how do all these white boys, be having, like, boats and ski-doos and cabins and these trucks? Like, how do they have all this stuff that we don't have, and we make the same money? And it's like, most of it isn't, part of it is inheritances and people who are ahead of you making the right decisions and looking out for you. I know, like, I think it was, what was it? Oh, just thinking about, like, the whole wedding situation. The average wedding costs $35,000 a year. I remember one of my coworkers, his son-in-law was white and his girl was white, and her grandmother set aside a dowry for her for $35,000. So you think, cool, the average wedding is $35,000. Her grandma set aside $32,000 for her. So I'm like, dang, gotta go on no more debt, because he had debt and she had debt, even though they both had good jobs. But it's like, boom, don't go into more debt and then buy a house and all that stuff while you get married. That's a different video. But anyways, so I'm thinking, like, my logical self was like, okay, cool, you ain't got to spend no more money because your grandmother took care of it. But no, they went deeper in debt to go spend another $30,000 because her mother got involved in all that stuff. But the point was that they started off, they had an opportunity to not go deeper into debt, but they chose to go deeper into it anyways, and start off, you know, even. Whereas we don't necessarily have that in our community like that. And like I said to my grandfather, I'm like, well, it's inheritance. Like, they're giving their kids stuff. And it's one thing that's weird too, because, like, when I listen to Yvette Cornell and Tone make their arguments, they think that the government is going to be subsidize that space. And the reality is, it's not enough of them. It's not enough 1% rich people to tax in order to sustain the rest of everybody else. So this is not going to work. It's not even practical. But their logic is they believe in, you know, in taxing inherited wealth and all that stuff. Now, her argument is that you do politics where you at, not where you want to be. But then it's like, for me, it's like, well, if I'm a young person and I'm about to inherit a bunch of houses from my grandparents and whatnot, I don't want to be taxed again when I start selling and doing things. Like, why? I just don't. I think you do politics where you are at individually. She doesn't subscribe to that. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes we set up these policies and these rules, but then when we get out of a situation and we don't need them no more, we're still affected by it because we push for it. And I guess it makes sense because you push for it when other people were going through the same things. But the premise is that, you know, liberals want capital gains taxes. They want inherited taxes, money that has already been taxed. But when you give it to your kids, they say, well, we want a piece of that to give it to somebody else and redistribute it. I'm like, whatever. But there's not enough rich people in this country to do that, to sustain black life. So it's not going to happen. But you do see the area how, you know, if there are certain things that if you don't do, like getting married and staying married before you have kids, stuff like that, those are fundamental things that we know when you don't do those things, it leads to poverty, it leads to you losing wealth and whatnot. So it's like, I was watching the one thing on Fox Business when it was saying, like, this is right after the recession. It's right after the banks played America, robbed us, whatever, and Obama had opportunity to lock him up, throwing away the key. He didn't. He bailed them out. But a lot of young people, millennials at the time, were, like, not buying houses. They don't see the value in buying a home. And cool, their parents were feeling the same way. They weren't buying homes. They weren't investing into the stock market because these young people were oblivious and don't know how the world works. You know that these crashes happen periodically. They're gonna come. It's gonna be another crash, another recession, and there'll be a recovery time. And it's been happening since the inception of this country, well, since 1930. And that's just how the world works. But the people who do in those harsh times, in those hard times, still invest regardless of how it looks. Those are the people who end up winning in the end. And then other people looking at, oh, I want what he has, but you didn't make the sacrifices that person made, so it is what it is. Right? Different video, but a dude I used to work with told me about how his father became a millionaire. He lived out in Orchard Park, New York, which was where the Buffalo Bills Stadium was at, and how back then nobody wanted to live out there because it's too far back there. This is before the roads, everything was built. So it took like an hour or 2 hours to get out there back in the day before, the roads were built the right way. And what he did was like the banks already had so many defaulted homes that they didn't want any more. So he was like, yo, I'll give you $1 for this house, for that land, and this whatever. Like he paid the bare minimum. And the bank was like, well, we got enough houses and stuff like that. So he got lucky. He gambled. The bank's like, yo, we got too many foreclosed houses, too much foreclosed land. So we can't do nothing with all this. So if we can get some money coming in, we're gonna take it. And he benefited from that. And then boom, when the recovery came, he instantly became a millionaire because of that. But I'm just saying, like, and of course we know how red light and all that stuff messed us up. So we couldn't benefit from that too. But moral of the story though, I believe in giving, like, people, and I don't understand this because you got liberals that always try to shame and come at Donald Trump for getting inheritance from his father. And I don't understand when black people hop in that conversation with white liberals to shit on Trump for that reason. And I'm like, it's like every time I hear it, I'm like, no, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to give your kids an inheritance. You're supposed to leave them with wealth. You're supposed to set them up. You're not supposed to have them helping you out when you're old. You're supposed to help them out. And for whatever reason, black folks like to participate in that conversation. I'm like, you gotta chill. Like Bloomberg's talking about, my daddy never gave me nothing. Okay, good for you. I would prefer more black men being like Donald Trump's father than being like Bloomberg's father, right? That's how it should be. I don't understand that whole argument of, now Trump lies and says how much it really was and all that stuff, but nonetheless, the data says that like 60% of inherited wealth is gone by the third generation. So anybody who gets wealth and it hasn't completely blown it, they're in a 30-something percentile. Like that's rare, right? So most of the people, the wealth is gone by the third, fourth generation. You're lucky to have some stuff last 5, 10 generations because you obviously knew what you were doing or you made some of the right decisions. But we need to be more in the focus of building it up and looking out for our kids to go downwards, not upwards. The one data said that even black kids who are from the middle class, they might not get or obtain to what their parents got. It's like, it's weird. And if you can look at it now, a lot more of our grandparents and great-parents were able to own homes with less incomes and education than we have today. So, it is what it is. But that's just my thoughts on what Eagle Dollar said. Is like, a lot of black players, a lot of black men, and I'm not even looking at the athlete part, because of course we know that was the context of that conversation, but just think about the average dude the brother who becomes a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, engineer, whatever, making 6 figures, he's got a lot more on his plate than the men he's competing with, right? Like he's got a lot more to deal with in this whole world domination thing. And I just think it's silly though when I hear some of these women talk and they're completely oblivious to where black life really is and what it really means. Right, you talking all this X, Y. It's like basically you want him to just set up a lifestyle for you to go this deep into debt. Granted, most Americans are like that. A lot of white folks that live in the burbs and all that is all hat and no cattle. Right, I remember this one white dude. He lived in like Hamburg, New York, which is another place where a lot of Buffalo Bills players live because that's like the highest ass tax bracket, whatever. And I before I knew him, I knew his house because his house was older looking and it wasn't new and he didn't have a big SUV in front of the porch. And one day we was at the same gym, and he owns his own business, not a poor dude, but he got 3 sons. He was like, yo, and you could kind of tell he was, I guess because of where he lived at and the fact that he owned his own business, he assumed that I would care that he was driving like a beat up 1993 truck or something, Cherokee. I'm like, dude, I'm the wrong person for you to even think like that about, but you can tell like he felt some type of way. So imagine how he feels probably around his other white colleagues or whatever. But the point he was making was like a lot of the folks that live out there, they are the people that get hurt in recessions because their whole lifestyle is fortified by debt. Like their one big situation, even though they might have good incomes, making $100,000 plus a year, whatever, they're already getting their asses killed in taxes. They already got too much vehicle, too much house, and then they got kids going to college, and like they're just a bad situation away from losing everything. And we saw that in 2008, where a lot of white folks, lost a lot of houses, had to downgrade, had to remove, had to reset. So he was like, yo, I got sons. I don't live like that. I use an old beat up car that gets me where I need to go. And I'm like, that's more practical, whatever. But I'm saying some sisters don't see that. A lot of them just see the big shiny things and the houses and the cars and the vacations. And they're like, that shit costs money. And you want to go deep into debt. I was having a conversation with this female too about like just one of my friends who, when he moved into his house with his wife and I helped, and I'm like, white couple, and I'm just like, yo, and to myself, I'm saying, like, yeah, I got a lot of debt. Like, I just bought a new house, and I just got married. That her father didn't, her father helped, but she took, because of what she wanted and what her mother wanted, it cost more than what he was willing to pay. So she had to go in deeper debt to get what she wanted. New car, new house, all new appliances. I'm like, and a new car note. And they never had the real discussion about money. Obviously, they're divorced today. But I'm just like, yo, this is just too much debt for y'all to start off. Like, this is the thing, too. Neither one of their asses cooked. Neither one of them cooked. And yet, still, they got this refrigerator that was like $3,000. You know, those joints with the suicide doors, and then the suicide doors at the top, and then the freezer's at the bottom, and it comes down, and the freezer big as hell. Why they got a freezer? They got a freezer for like a family of 10, and they're a family of 2 with no kids, and neither one of them cook. Why do you need a refrigerator like that? But I'm saying, like, it was dumb shit like that they would go into debt, and I'm sure all those things probably led to their divorce and the money conversation. You know, and not to mention she was already an engineer. She wanted to go back to school to be a teacher. So she's already making decent money as an engineer, still $35,000 in debt from that degree that she doesn't want anymore, to go back to school, another $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in debt to be a teacher, to make $30,000 less than what she was already making. They obviously didn't have that conversation about money and resources before they got married, and they ended up divorcing. But that's a little off topic a bit. But I don't know. I think people need to be more practical where we at and what our expectations are in marriages, how to build wealth. There are some sacrifices and things that the black community specifically would have to do differently to catch up or to sustain it. And there's luxuries that you might not have that your white counterparts could have. If the goal is to build a strong black community and all that stuff and build it for the next generation, you can't do what they do. You just can't. And the fact that a lot of black people in general, but black men in particular in this conversation, they got, he said he helping out his parents, his grandparents, and his cousins and whatnot like that. Like, how do you do all that and then you try to start and build your own family too? Like, that's hard. I'm not saying that he's an athlete where he makes millions. I'm sure it still hurts. But imagine the average dude who's doing that. The motherfucker who's only making $75,000, $80,000 a year, and yet he's trying to do the same things. Say Pookie and Ray Ray and them and the family, the cousin Pookies and whatnot, and help his mama and his daddy and this and that, especially when he didn't get it from the top down, meaning he's first generation wealthy or first generation college educated, and he's got to deal with all the obstacles and still have leave in his pocket. Or again, his buddy in the other cubicle ain't got to deal with none of those problems. When his boy gets married, her father's gonna pay for their wedding, or their family left them the house. Or the parents probably split up or divorced, and they said, "Here, kids, have to take this house and just use it so you can not have one less bill." I probably can't pay for your college education or whatever that, but I'm gonna give you a house where you can stay at and live here, until you get out of college, so you can not get debt down. You won't have to pay any bills because the house is paid off already. Like, those are the type of things you got to do to move forward and to get up. And sometimes just say no. Like, realistically speaking, Michelle Singletary, shout out to her, a black economist, she points out this very topic that I'm trying to talk about, which I'm ranting off about other things. But she talked about how a lot of black folks don't say no to their family, and they let it set them back a bit from pursuing their own dreams and goals and aspirations and whatnot. Not to mention, come on now, you already know about the kids who got gas bills in their name and light bills in their name. Before they even establish some credit, they shit is already trashed because their mom did some grimy shit to their name. Whatever. But it's real out there. We shouldn't have to start over every time. Like, we're always starting over. We never could go and continue it on base by base. And that is one of the reasons why we have a hard time catching up in the wealth situation on areas that we can change. Like, there's stuff that we're behind because it's not our fault, but there's a lot of things that are our fault that are we behind, and this is something we can correct in what we're doing. Sometimes you gotta say no to fame. It's just that simple. And you notice if you listen to like Oprah and Gayle, she just did something where she said, stop lending your friends money and stuff like that. And it's like there's a reason why these billionaires and millionaires people, they live by these certain principles, because they know what they're talking about and they know what will happen if they try to save everybody. It just don't work like that. My rant is done. I think I might have some clips to put in here to illustrate what I was talking about. I think I got a clip of Michelle Singletary talking about this.
Everyone wants something from you, but for Philip Buchanan, even his own mother wanted a piece of the action. In his new book, New Money, Staying Rich, Buchanan chronicled a nightmare scenario with his mom after being selected in the first round of the 2002 NFL Draft. Soon after being chosen by the Raiders, he writes that his mother demanded $1 million for raising him for 18 years. Buchanan wrote, quote, "That was news to me. If my mother taught me anything, it's that this is the most desperate demand that a parent can make on a child." The NFL cornerback instead bought his mom a house, which ultimately didn't work out either. Buchanan told Fox Sports he wanted his story out there to serve as a cautionary tale. Demands for cash, cars, and homes by family is not uncommon for young pro athletes. Cowboys All-Pro Tyron Smith, a first-round pick himself, had to file a restraining order against his parents over physical threats and constant torment regarding money.